feels like they really care, but we often feel like they're using us a whole lot. It could be that it's a form of emotional, psychological shutdown. There's a lot of intermittent reinforcement happening in those relationships. Welcome to Fan Mail, a space where I answer your real questions about toxic relationships, narcissistic abuse, and the long road to healing. Thank you so much, Sean, for asking this really great question on YouTube. And Sean asked, what does it mean when you no longer cry? I had several reactions to this question. One is that it could be that it's a form of emotional, psychological shutdown from chronic fight or flight state where you have learned that numbing your emotions is the best survival mechanism, or you're so overwhelmed that it's the only way that you can cope is just to not feel because there's way too much to feel, that you sort of like almost dissociated from yourself. But I had two other possible thoughts of why this may be happening. Sometimes toxic or narcissistic people see emotional displays as forms of manipulation. So if you were to have a reaction to something that's very powerful, very big, and they just saw it as manipulative or exploitative, that would feel extremely invalidating and minimizing. So you'd learn over time that it's just safer not to have any reaction at all, because to have it mislabeled almost is more painful than to just cope with it on your own. But it also could be because you have had a chronic experience of someone in your life labeling some emotions, maybe not all of them, but some of them as either wrong or weak or shameful, either by an authority figure like a parent or someone that you deeply respected. And so you've learned that it's just better to not cry, in order to be respected or seen or not be weak around this person, you've learned to just shut that part of yourself off. So whatever the reason is, it's really important for you to create safety within yourself to feel what you're feeling. Maybe for a long time you're not going to cry, but that doesn't mean you can't acknowledge that you're having a hard emotional experience, that maybe you're feeling sad or loss or frustration, upset, and to find a way to express it in other ways. Maybe you turn on softer music. Maybe you reflect on it and take a walk. Maybe you journal, but for you to acknowledge it with a form of gentleness and support. So you may not have to express it literally, physically with a visceral reaction, but it doesn't mean that you can't find ways for you to create safety and validation for yourself, because bottom line, you deserve to have an emotional life, an emotional self, and all emotions have a place. They have an important place in our lives. I see them as like warning signals on a car's dashboard that give us more information about what's happening and how we feel about what's going on in our life. So crying is not a weakness. It's just more information and a way of expressing your humanity. So thank you so much for this question. I hope this answer helps. So here's another question that I got on YouTube about narcissistic relationships. And the commenter wrote, it seems like sunk cost fallacy is a huge impediment for many. What might be tips to understand its falseness? So there's a couple points being made here. I want to first start by defining what sunk cost fallacy is. According to ChatGPT's definition, it is the mistaken belief that you must continue investing time, energy, or resources into something because you've already invested so much, even when it's harmful or no longer viable. But the questioner is making the assumption that it's because of the sunk cost that we've put into this relationship is the reason what we continue to stay in the toxic relationship. I actually think that's not the primary reason we stay. It's the secondary one. I think the primary one is because we're confused, because the toxic person does not really reveal what their actual level of investment is. It feels like they really care, but we often feel like they're using us a whole lot because they're deliberately muddying the waters by showing just enough goodness or just enough remorse and affection at just the right moments to leave us feeling hopeful and encouraged when there actually is no hope, encouragement at all. That it's just that goodness that we're seeing is actually a form of manipulation. We got to remember there's a lot of intermittent reinforcement happening in those relationships, which leads us to not for sure what's true or real, whether or not they actually love us or whether they're just using us. So it's clarifying the confusion, to me, is the biggest hindrances to why we can't get out of these relationships. But I do think sunk cost fallacy plays a role once we're in and we've been in it for a long time, because we feel like we've invested so much, we might as well just stick it out and keep with it. I've heard people as they start to get older thinking, well, I've already spent 30 years with this person. How do I start over? Isn't it just better to sort of finish this, let it trail out naturally, because I've have so much investment. And maybe the way through this is to ask yourself this question. And that is, if I stay in this relationship, what do I keep from being able to invest in instead? In other words, if I was to get out, what possibilities might I really actually have with a new future starting over? And we can also ask ourselves this question. If I met this person today, would I choose them knowing what I now know? I think that if we start to realize that we have a future, and even if it's a future that maybe feels limited because of age or resources or access, it doesn't mean it can't be a better, more empowering or peaceful future. And often we put so much into these relationships, we stack so much of our hopes and dreams that we forget to invest in ourselves. So thank you so much for this question. It was really fascinating. And if you want me to answer your questions, please just put it in the comment or where I invite those types of questions coming in, because I'd love to answer it. And I deeply appreciate you guys watching and being a follower of mine. So if you haven't, be sure to subscribe and let me know what you would like me to address for our next fan mail question.